Hi, I'm Paul, host of the new P&L. Some dream and some do. Most of us have passions in our personal and professional lives, ideas about the way the world should be or how business should behave. But for a select few, that passion transforms into action. They turn their passion into their professional purpose, and it drives their focus, their motivation, and their inspiration. So today on the new P&L, we're hosting a Passion into Purpose Roundtable, where we've got a group of inspirational entrepreneurs who will talk about their entrepreneurial journey, the challenges, the highs and lows, the successes and learnings, giving and offering encouragement to those budding entrepreneurs or those already in business. So to my guests, everyone listening and watching, thank you very much for joining the new P&L Passion into Purpose Roundtable. We're going to start the conversation by taking a moment to explore the importance of role models in the entrepreneurial journey, particularly for those who maybe don't have professional role models or positive role models more generally. I wonder, and probably Elliot, it's a good opportunity to start with you, how does a young budding entrepreneur cut through the tsunami of advice and business books and so on in that regard, and find the right people with the right advice to get them on their journey and support them as a role model?
I think that's such an interesting question because everybody's journey is different and it's a real individual experience. When I was growing up, there was a real lack of role models. I was kind of like a really swotty little ginger kid and I was really into learning. And actually, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and there was an absolute, there was probably maybe Anne of Green Gables, which wasn't exactly entrepreneurial. There was nobody I could aspire to in business unless I wanted to be maybe a secretary, potentially. That was the height of it. So I do think it's really important today to let people develop their own sense of self. And at Brixton Finishing School, we have a big mentoring program where we do find role models that actually mirror people's lived experience. And also we spend a lot of time analysing exactly what they want to get out of the experience. So it's really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Veronica, you obviously run the Heaven Company, but you also founded Briefcases, which works with lots of young people to get them into various industries, printing most obviously, but others as well. How do you find, or how do they find their role models, and how do you help guide them in that regard?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. I think just the fact that we're involved in having these interactions with Briefcases and bringing industry directly into contact with young people, it's giving opportunities to have conversations that they might not otherwise have. So I think just having that opportunity to ask difficult questions, and some of the briefs that we set are so challenging that they have to kind of really think about, okay, how would I do this? But also, how can I think of it from a commercial perspective rather than just from the point of view of what I'm learning? So oftentimes what I find will happen is that the course lecturers or course leaders will actually say, would you mind having a quiet conversation offline with XYZ students in addition as well, because they want to have they need some additional information or they need some additional support. But also there is a big question really around whether there's a possibility for some business people to help and be mentors and role models to the students. So it's a question I get asked quite a bit, actually. So there's definitely a question about how to kind of bring that bit a little bit closer together.
Yeah. Chris, from your perspective, you're coming at it from quite a different angle. You work with the homeless on the streets of Sydney in Australia.
Yes.
I mean, clearly they have their own challenging times at the moment. That's most of the time the reason why they're there on the street. How do you work with your homeless friends to find positive role models in their lives?
Oh, I think you can be the positive role model. And for us, it's always been about not feeding into the victim narrative that I feel so sorry for you being here, et cetera, et cetera. And the feedback we always have is your point of difference being our organisation is always, we're a group of people that support people in need, but we're the same people. So there's no one actually there. We don't do a major amount of branding. We do nothing authoritative. It's all about us as a collective. And I think that is probably in that space one of the biggest things, because before you can get to a role model, you've got to trust the people around you, etc. But I think the role models in the space that we work in, We're looking at bringing in some really high net worth individuals because as funny as it is, some of them have got mental health issues because people are benchmarking against each other, 10 mil, 20 mil, 50 mil, which I find completely nuts, but it's true. Like we've got approached by a group, but I think they will provide real great role models for people on the street looking at that really far away. Oh my God, I've got this leader here who's chatting to me. But I think on the reverse side, I think that'll also bring a little bit of perspective to those people, address some of the issues that they potentially have and see their value themselves as people.
Yeah. Almira, I'm interested to get your view on whether you feel the pandemic has demonstrated, I guess, businesses are imaginative and they're innovative, or whether you feel that this pandemic has demonstrated that there's real paucity of imagination and diversity of thought at the top of business today and today's entrepreneurial leaders.
Yeah, so I think for us at Impactful, innovation is at the heart of everything we do. It's one of the most important things we encourage businesses to do, is to think about how to use their business and apply that to social needs in an innovative way. And so when COVID first hit, we were so inspired by the rapidity to which businesses responded, from turning waste gin products into hand sanitizers to the work that Display Mode did. So many businesses quickly, they pivoted and started thinking about how they can contribute. And that's something that we would love to see continue post-COVID, for businesses to always think about how they can accelerate their business and use their business towards helping out the world in greater needs.
Yeah. Carl, from your perspective, I mean, you spend, under normal circumstances, you travel the world through HackerWorks, teaching businesses to work more collaboratively and act with more authenticity. How do you feel businesses have generally responded to the pandemic, with imagination and innovation, or with has it exposed a lack of it at the top of the business world in your mind?
Well, both. I think it's really devastated the industry that I'm in, the events industry, and events and training. So it's had a really big impact. And I think deep down inside, a lot of people just want it to go away and go back to normal. But I think a lot of people have realised that won't happen. It's never going to be the same again. And there's some really exciting changes on the horizon as a result. That people, even myself, having to go. I had a particular client that I approached that I wanted to deal with, and now that market has expanded because of the internet. There's so much more possibility out there. I think people are starting to respond really quickly to those potential possibilities.
Yeah. Does anyone in the panel, or has anyone in the panel, seen real incredible examples of innovation that is going to drive a business out of the pandemic, or help society to adapt as we come out of the pandemic? What examples have you seen over the last few weeks that would represent that? Anyone like to take the lead on that?
I can speak about my printer, if you like, who lost 90% of his business straight away, who now does the face shields. In 3 weeks, he started doing the face shields and pivoting to that. So he was able to keep 28 people employed, which I thought was just amazing. And also just our vision. I mean, we're still one of his print clients, to be able to walk in there and see a joint that looks like CSI now, with face masks and gloves and all that, hair nets, the whole business, right? And just how quickly he did it, and how, now with the printing starting to come back, he's really well placed going forward in the next sort of 12 to 18 months to have both segments covered.
Yeah, yep.
I mean, can I add something there? I think the other, how so many people have started to use social media a lot more than they would do. So there's lots of people moving out of their comfort zones, creating video content, really putting themselves out there, which they wouldn't have otherwise have done. And I think a lot of people are finding it to be a great, form of marketing for their businesses. And, I think it's kind of pushing people outside their comfort zones. And lots of businesses and lots of smaller businesses are really doing that and really moving themselves forward.
Yeah.
If I can just add one extra thing as well, I just would like to say that I think this whole thing with, the technology has always been there, but the difference is now, and we're all on this virtual roundtable meeting, but the technology has always been there, but now we seem to have a much more confidence through necessity to crack on and actually get on with this. And in many ways, actually, I think it's made a lot of businesses have to be a lot more inclusive, because, the fact that you can work from home means that people who perhaps have a disability, or people who have different conditions or medical conditions, or just anything really, it's just opened up the opportunities. So it's become more inclusive in some ways, I think, through this whole pandemic.
Yeah.
Can I just add one last point, just playing
Absolutely.
on Veronica's point? I think what you're saying is completely true. And just, I hate to use us as an example, but we were limited to London, and we had a certain capacity for the number of young people we can help. And because we sort of came from a digital background and took the digital kind of opportunity really swiftly, we've kind of scaled from like 36 people to 500 people we can help literally in a couple of weeks. And also, it's like places in the north of England that we'd never be able to support young people in because we're so London centric. That's really, really exciting to me. The fact that, you know, we can spread free education across the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. Self-doubt and imposter syndrome are all common characteristics of entrepreneurs, and we've all probably found our way in and out of those situations, and probably still do. You know, to the outside world, we can seem like a formidable striver, but inside we go from feeling like a fearless fighter to a feckless failure in an hour sometimes. Tanya, I know you're relatively new with We and AI to the entrepreneurial journey. You've started it over the last few months. It'd be great to get your view of sort of how you pull through that day after day as you start a new entrepreneurial journey, and figure out how you battle on with the confidence, even if it isn't always there inside.
Yeah, so I've also, it's my first journey into the not-for-profit sector, so it's very new to me on that front. I have set up a business before, but it was quite a long time ago, so it's an interesting time to be reliving the kind of challenges of being a founder. And actually, I found that sometimes working within organisations can be worse for my self-doubt because there are people there that tell you things that can't be done, or are constantly making you have to overcome those barriers. So far, possibly because I've got such wonderful people involved to you know, do the opposite. I've not had much. I've not had much of the kind of self-doubt, but I think another reason for that, and Ali, it's funny, you were kind of saying you were quite a kind of swotty child, is I think I've also always been quite heavy on the research front. Mm-hmm. So I think you do get different types of entrepreneurs. Some just get, you know, have this amazing vision and just find their way there. And I've always been very much on the, you know, research, kind of not feeling that I can really start something until I've done a fairly large amount of due diligence, especially when it's an area that's new to me. And I think that gives you a confidence. And I know that there's been studies done that this is the, you know, fairly, sorry to be gendered, but fairly female approach, is that, you know, women often do feel the need that they need to validate a lot more before kind of setting off on the journey. And I think in my business life in general, I left a sector at the turn of the century because I felt that I didn't know enough about business, and self-funded myself through an executive MBA because I felt that I needed to know that no one would be able to throw anything at me that I hadn't thought of. So I guess that's my two things is just getting the research done and remembering that you can also feel pretty terrible within an organisation as well. Yeah.
Arif, you and your business partner Asad started Click, or launched Click, just as we went into lockdown. How's that been for you over the last 3 months in terms of, you know, believing there's a future, believing there's a long term, and riding out this short-term challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as you said, we launched in March, and I think what we were is, you know, I think it took a while for people to work out what the world was like. So I think, look, you know, we realized very early on that the world was not the same as it was pre-March, and we kind of then took the time to say, okay, look, we're not going to go out there trying to find business, because I think it was the wrong time to be trying to sell, and also we didn't really feel comfortable about that either. So we spent the time, you know, business development, so trying to work out what our content strategy was, you know, as I said before, working on, you know, learning new skills. So, you know, I learned how to make videos and edit videos, and, you know, my background's in finance, and I normally don't have a creative bone in my body, but it, you know, it kind of gave us the time to really think about different ways of, you know, speaking to clients. And we kind of increased our exposure. We did a great bit of CSR work as well. So we worked with a charity to provide laptops to to young kids and stuff like that. So we really just said, this is not the time to be traditionally selling as we would have done before. It's really a time to develop some content and stuff like that. And now we're seeing, as people are opening up, and people do have problems they want to solve now. So obviously we're trying to solve problems of sustainable technology, and I think now not only the sustainable side of stuff, but also the money saving side of stuff is going to be important for the next 12 months, and therefore we're kind of started to change our messaging as well now. So it's just about fitting in with the mood and the right times.
Yeah, I'm going to be listening very intently to the answers of this next question. As a 51-year-old, I'm interested in your view on whether age matters in entrepreneurialism.
Over me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's start with you, and then we'll see where we go with the others.
I'm not a lot younger than you. I mean, I'm 40. I mean, I worked in the city for 15 years. Kind of thought that I wanted to do my own thing, and and have started doing it. So for me, I don't think age makes any difference. It's all about mindset, and it's all about being in the right place. Right opportunity. So
we've lost Arif for the moment.
I think it's.
He may come back. Oh, there we go.
Yes, I was saying, even if you're 70 and you've got a great idea, then there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
I think that the average age, the studies show the average age is in the 40s, and then the average age of very successful startups is beyond that, is kind of late 40s or something, which people are always telling me this time around, being a good 15 years older than when I last did this kind of thing. People have been telling me reassuringly, and I guess the difference that I've found is that although your energy levels are, like for me, my energy level is much lower. I can't work the long nights that I used to do and stay up all night, and my working day is shorter. But I feel I'm probably doing more high impact activities during that time, just because a degree of experience has shown me that there's certain things that I can, maybe other people are better placed to do than me, feeling that I, need to do everything, control everything. So that's been the difference, I think, for me coming back to it a few years later.
I think often too, the common perception is that perhaps when you're a little bit older, you can't do the 80-hour weeks, but that makes the assumption those 80 hours are all productive. And perhaps when you get a bit older, you learn to circumvent some of the challenges and, create a few shortcuts that maybe you're as productive in the 40 or 50 or 60 hours, rather, you would hope, rather than the 80. I mean, two of the reasons individuals start businesses, launch as an entrepreneur, often it's there's a moment in time where someone takes a leap of faith, and it gives them the opportunity to follow a passion, to follow something they've thought about for a long time. And for others, it may be something adverse in their lives that has affected them or someone they love or know, and they start that journey to wrong or right, if you like. I'd love to get a few views from the panel about what was that trigger point that started your entrepreneurial journey. Carl, I'd like to start with you, because I think you're from New Zealand as well, and you've made a fascinating transition from sort of internationally successful lawyer to taking Maori culture around the world, and that's quite a jump. And it would be good to understand how you went from lawyer to HakaWorks.
Yeah, well, I came over here for a couple of years, and the plan was to get rich really quickly. Of course, that doesn't happen. And I just got to a point where I realized that, if I keep proceeding along the line that I'm projecting on it, I'll be here forever. And what is really important in my life? What are the things that I want to achieve? That was the question that I wanted to answer at that point. And so I thought, I'm going to have to do it now. I'm going to have to jump in, throw everything into this and make it happen, because now's the time, is the right time. So, but the idea has always been there right from a child. And it was just waiting for that time where I was brave enough and had the courage and the confidence enough to go out and do it.
Yeah. Almira, you've been immersed in social enterprises for a number of years, and I know you come from a sociological background. What drove your passion and your step into social innovation?
I think for me, it was kind of, I'd worked in the charity sector for many years, and I'm still involved in an incredible charity that helps unaccompanied asylum-seeking children access education. But so much of our work is dependent on getting funding. And we're competing for the same pocket of funding as so many other incredible organizations. And so our ability to actually do work is dependent on that. And for me, that was just not sustainable for me to really express my passions and to do that. So then I turned to commercial and the private sector, because I really feel there is power and ability to create systemic change through using businesses with their access to resources, their ability to innovate. And there's a way to really meld both the passion of social justice, but as well within the corporate and commercial world.
Yeah. Chris, I'd love you to give a potted summary of how you ended up with Pass It On clothing, because I think it's a fantastic story. That yeah.
Well, another group to embarrass myself in front of, isn't it? I partnered up with a lovely Spanish girl who I'm still with, but I was working at the time, so was she. We started cohabiting, and I got home one day. She's a stylist, and all my clothes were gone. The whole wardrobe was kaput. And she said, "Mate, you're not wearing any of that anymore." And I went, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "It's gone." And so that was how we started this. We started from a wardrobe cull. We've just actually ticked over 100,000th piece that we've passed on to homeless communities, like in the last sort of 10 days. And so from there, I saw one of the people you guys might be familiar with as well, Joshua Coombs, who cuts hair overseas over there in London for Do Something for Nothing. I saw a vision of him, and then I saw some guys here in Australia called Orange Sky who do mobile laundry. And I had all these clothes because obviously as a bloke, I thought if the relationship falls over, I'm not starting again. So I just chucked them all up into the loft in case I could use them again. But it's still going. So there you go. I had to find a reason to repurpose them. And I just approached these young guys and I thought, well, when you're doing your laundry out in the homeless space, that's when clothing is top of mind. And I saw that there was no one else doing that. They were young Australians of the Year, so they would have got a random message through Facebook from me about how to start, and we got a trial, and that's how we started it. Now we run 13 services a month, in Sydney, and we'll do about 50,000 pieces this year passed on, and it's been really, really big since the pandemic. We used to do an average of sort of 300 to 400 pieces at our Martin Place, which is the biggest outreach we run each week, and we're now doing 800 to 1,000 on that same night. It's really grown, and I sadly think that the real problem is going to be sort of in another 12 months. I think there's probably going to be 2 stages of when business is also going to find and struggle. We've got some government giving some initiatives here to people to keep them in work. I think the first bit of them comes off at the end of September, which I think will be the initial cull, and then after that, I think early next year will be the next one when businesses have to sort of start planning ahead for 12 months. So I think we're going to be in a busy space, but that's sort of our story. It was just totally by accident that that happened, and now we've sort of moved that into a social enterprise. We've just opened a shop in the middle of the pandemic. Nothing like doing that, and which is good, and that's given us a lot of street presence as well. And obviously we had a big online presence before, but there's a lot to be said for having some bricks and mortar that people can walk into and actually feel and understand your brand and get to know you.
Veronica and Arif, you're both in the broader sustainability sector. It'd be great to get both your individual views. Perhaps if we start with you, Veronica, in terms of how you came into that sector, what drove your interest in sustainability and CSR?
Thanks, Paul. That's a really great question. Well, for me, my defining moment, if I can call it that, was actually being a young executive and picking up a report which was talking about the role of business in a changing world. And I thought, wow, this is amazing, because basically business was always about, it's all about the profit. How do you sell more of this? How do you sell more of that? And I read this report, which was this much bigger kind of perspective that, business has a bigger role to play in terms of society and various things. And that basically set me on my path. That kind of got me into becoming a maverick within the businesses that I worked in, leading on a lot of different strategies, leading on corporate responsibility. I became corporate responsibility director for a large business, then group corporate responsibility director for an even larger business, and then subsequently on to founding the Heaven Company, which is helping other companies with sustainability, management, communication, that side of things. But it was really that one thing of kind of starting to realize that actually there's something more that business needs to be doing and can be doing. And I always have had this sort of like innate feeling about being, you know, sort of conscience, really. And that was really the start of it. That kind of got me on this whole path. And of course, as time goes on, you develop, you do further things, etc. But really, that was the pivotal thing. That was my starting point. And now, of course, the whole world is much more engaged in the whole sustainability agenda, and the fact of, you know, conscious consumers, and conscious consumers need conscious companies, and, you know, social purpose and social value, and all of these things. And it's so crucial. But at the heart of it, that was my starting point, and that's literally sort of set me on my path for life, really.
And Arif, your journey from investment banker to sustainable technology enthusiast.
Yeah, well, it's a big move, you know, and I think for me, you know, I've got 2 young kids basically, and I think, you know, children nowadays are questioning more and more about where things are coming from. You know, they're challenging even their parents about how sustainable they are in their daily lives. And I think, you know, as a parent, you kind of are responsible for your, you know, kids, and you kind of think, well, what kind of world am I bringing them into? What are we leaving for them? What problems are we leaving for them? So for me, you know, when we started Click, you know, we were trying to solve more of a kind of a service-led problem. But the more and more we looked into the problems of e-waste, we realized what a big problem it was, and how it was not being solved, and how, you know, businesses are the real drivers of this, as well as consumers, but businesses can really fix this on a level. And I think, you know, both myself and my co-founder Asad, we have like young kids, and we thought, you know what, we need to be leaving them with something better. And look, we can do something about this, and we can do something about this in a practical way. So, you know, it's not, you know, just by giving businesses a choice and understand, you know, allow them to understand that choice is not only more cost effective for them, but also greener. You know, it's just an easy way of doing it. And, you know, we're just making a smaller problem going forward for, you know, the next generations.
Yeah. Every generation hopes for, you know, the next generation will be more transparent, more honest, and more open, both politically and from a business perspective. When you all, because you're all in one shape or another working with that next generation of business leaders, what inherent characteristics and capabilities do you see in them that gives you the confidence to know that as we move forward with all these challenges, sustainability and societal and everything else, that we will be in good hands in that next generation? Ali, if we can start with you and your in the Brixton Finishing School.
I'm really proud of this generation that are coming through, and I think the current news narrative around Black Lives Matter has really shown me that they are such a powerful force. They're so articulate and talented, and they're just not going to put up with some of the, sorry to say, crap we did, basically. And they really care about their communities, and they're willing to make decisions based on what is a good place to work, what is a good brand, what reflects their purpose and values. And then, I hate to use the word woke, they're definitely a lot more intelligent about the bigger system than I ever was when I was growing up.
Yeah. Tanya, you're in an area that is going to affect most parts of our future in AI, and we have to figure out a way for society to work together with AI, or for AI to work for society, not against it. I know when we spoke initially, you have a very large group of cohorts that assist with your research and with your recommendations and so on with regards to the future of AI. What conversations have you had in those groups that give you the confidence to recognize that these people have their finger on the pulse, the younger generation has their finger on the pulse in terms of technology working for society rather than the other way around?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because as much as I agree that there are different values and different degrees of questioning in the current generation, I still feel that we have a massive responsibility to also give all the information and not to assume that they can work it all out themselves. So certainly when you look to AI education, there's you know, lots of programs in this country for computer science skills, but in terms of actually informing young people of all ages about how technology affects their life in general, actually there isn't very much, and we haven't done, you know, as a society, we haven't done a great job of that. And so most most interactions that young people have won't necessarily be that they'll be through you using technology rather than learning about it at a kind of societal level.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we can just let them make their own conclusions, because obviously an issue quite close to my heart is that an awful lot of AI is completely invisible, completely hidden. You don't know when a decision has been made about you, so how can you question that decision?
Yeah.
Back to your question about the young people we work with, I have actually been surprised, not surprised because I wouldn't be doing this if I was, but it's still been quite kind of a wake-up call when you speak to young people and you tell them some things that are going on in AI and how it affects their lives and some of the stories, and they are so shocked. You know, I deal with this day in, day out, so every time I see that level of shock, it's still kind of, you know, it's still, and sometimes excited, so it's not just thinking about the negatives, it's also like, oh my goodness, that's amazing, you can do that. And I think it's really important for who we get into creating technology and AI in the future is to be working this level of education so that we get different types of people in. So if you ask people, you know, do you want to learn Python? A lot of people, especially from certain backgrounds, will say, no, you know, what? That's not something I woke up this morning doing. If you want to say, do you want to solve, you know, complex societal issues through building, you know, kind of amazing models, then you might get different answers from different questions, different people. So I think the answer is that there is still, certainly in the technology sector, about thinking about, you know, how AI works, there's still a big gap, not because the young people aren't motivated, questioning, committed, but because we have not released and are not engaging and are not educating on that level. So we still have work to do.
Yeah. Every generation has its own challenges. We have some significant challenges and opportunities on our doorstep as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, and we have sustainability that we have to address now. And I think the pandemic has proven what happens when something does truly affect the world. And that's perhaps the greatest evidence of all that we needed of the economic impact, and people only act often on self-interest, and that economic impact has been tremendous. But I wonder whether we need leaders need a different set of characteristics as we move into the next, or move through the century, and tackle sustainability on a global level, tackle poverty and societal sort of structural challenges in society, and tackle the fourth industrial revolution and what that means with AI and automation and everything else. Do leaders need a different set of characteristics? And if so, where do they find them when we're still trying to find our way in this process? Who would like to start with that? Carl, perhaps from your perspective. Yeah. Speaking with global, you know, lots and lots of corporates and CEOs and executive management teams. What's your view on that?
Yeah, well, I think the shift is clearly, you know, organizations have been set up, or companies at least have been set up to make profit, and that's what drives them in the past. And moving forward, that's, you know, obviously that model hasn't brought about benefits to the community at a sustainable level. And so, you know, what needs to change? And I think it comes back to values. We've got to be really clear on what are really important values. And I had a read of those 17 sustainable goals last night of the United Nations, and I think there's some amazing ones there, and they're really simply set out. But I think, how do you get leaders that embrace their values? And I think there's a journey that people need to go on to discover who they are, their authenticity, and then, you know, their connection to their real selves, their connection to their communities. Those values usually are passed down from ancestors, and, you know, they've held our societies together over time. So what is it that comes from who you are in terms of your heritage and your upbringing and your connection to those things that you can bring into business? Yeah.
If I may say, actually, I completely agree with you, Carl, and picking up on values as being such an important thing. And, you know, really a fundamental thing actually for businesses to try and kind of work through in terms of whether their values that they're looking at are current for where they need to be, or indeed if they're still working on some old values that kind of need to be looked at again and refreshed and reconsidered. But just this point about the different skills needed, I think change for anyone is difficult, and that's always going to be a challenge. But the younger ones that are now coming through, and with the briefcases work, we're doing such a lot of work in terms of focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and there's a real sort of inherent passion coming from the young people that they absolutely get it. They believe that, and they believe in the aims and the goals of it. So I think with this time and space that we're having, this time of renewal and change, it's an opportunity for us to all kind of think about how can we create more space for people to find new ways to listen and to take on some of the bigger issues that are there. I mentioned before about just working from home, it's more inclusive, but that we need to find ways to sort of listen to some of the things that are really really going on within the businesses that we're working with or that we run, and actually make sure that we're listening and adapting to some of these changes that do need to happen.
Yeah.
I think in line with that, we've spoken to a lot of business leaders who have come to speak to us because they have a millennial workforce who are demanding from them that they only want to work for places that have purpose. And they want to keep their workforce. Obviously, it costs a lot of money to recruit new people. And so I think listening to your workforce, listening to your staff, giving them a space to express what they see for the business in 20 years, giving them a space to see beyond just the confines of the business and asking them about their own communities and how can that business help to serve those communities. So I agree with Veronica in terms of just like listen, keep your finger on the pulse, see what's going on, and be ambitious, be really ambitious, and be hopeful that you too can contribute. And it's not just the government or the public sector or the nonprofit sector that does this good work. It's all of us together communally.
Yeah. I mean, large societal problems are exactly that. They're large societal problems. They're economically, culturally, systemically ingrained. I'd love the view of a few of you on how, if you've got a budding entrepreneur that has an idea for a social enterprise or social innovation, how you give them the confidence and keep them believing that although it's only a limited impact that they may make, that it's still an important impact that they make, that whatever they do, whatever they deliver, whatever the challenges are, the broad challenges of society, that the decision they make to develop that social enterprise, to develop that entrepreneurial journey, that social innovation is important. That one step matters.
If I may just go first, I mean, what I would like to say is that, again, we're working with a large number of young people. The optimism and the hope that we see coming from them is just remarkable. Just before the lockdown, we were at one of our university partners with our industry people, and we were sort of getting feedback and listening to outcomes from, to a particular challenge. And actually, one of our industry partners actually almost had a tear in his eye, and he said, "This is just amazing. I can't believe that," because his perspective is, he's a good, long-standing, been working for many, many years, industry professional, and here are these sort of like 18 to 24-year-olds coming out with this completely fresh perspective of things he'd never even thought about, not actually considered that there was a wider societal purpose that could be addressed as part of coming up with a commercial solution. So the point of it is back to this listening thing. But I think I would always encourage this new thinking. I'm a real advocate of the next generation, really, because doing what we've done up until now has got us into a sticky situation. So we do need to think differently, and I think that new thinking is what we need to embrace and welcome this much more holistic approach to how we go about things.
Arif, from your perspective in the sustainable tech world, what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the one encouragement is that, every big idea started as a small idea. So, if somebody hadn't had the confidence to go out there and make a change, make a statement, then, none of the big, innovations that we see would have happened at all. And the second thing is that, the entrepreneurial journey isn't an individual journey. So once you're out there, once you're doing your thing, once you're talking about what you're doing, you find like-minded people, and people talking about the same thing, people moving in the same direction as you. And often, what I found from my own experience is that you can't do everything yourself. But if you find people who are like-minded, you team up together, and therefore you split the problem up. So it's not you trying to fight the world. It's you putting yourself out there, putting your ideas out there, and finding like-minded individuals. And I think the good thing about the younger generation is that maybe their egos are smaller than ours were, and therefore they are willing to collaborate, they are willing to work together. And I think that actually solves the problem, is people working together and grouping together rather than individuals trying to fight the big problem.
What? So sorry, you go, Mary.
Sorry. I think as well, if we look at, the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's happening behind climate change, so much of that was small grassroots organizations, just tackling it within their own communities and then coming together. And now we have this global movement where everywhere from here to Taiwan, everybody's coming towards this one social issue and working towards that. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And, with social media and everything, if, one person can do an initiative within their own community and spread the word, other people will be encouraged and inspired to do that within their community. And that's everybody working together kind of to make big change.
By virtue of running a business, you are all leaders. You lead staff, you lead areas of your industry or areas of your community. I just wondered whether leadership has come easily to you all, whether it's been something you've had to work at, what the challenges have been, if so, and whether you feel leaders are natural or whether leaders are made over time with experience and support and collaboration.
Can I go first on that one?
Really?
I'm with the made side of that argument. I think I was chatting about this yesterday actually, because we do a lot of stuff with our young people about how mistakes are actually where you grow, or what I like to call them learning occasions. And I was kind of describing my leadership journey and how it's the compound of hundreds of really awkward, painful, uncomfortable learning journeys that have got me to where I am today. And this morning I was speaking to my assistant, I've got this round table. She went, oh, you're such a good speaker. I said, no. I've learned to be a good speaker through all the times I wasn't one. And I think that's really important. And that means anybody can become a good leader. It's not as if it's some magical, amazing genetic thing you're born with. It is created within yourself. And I think that's a brilliant thing to teach people, that they could all have the possibility to lead and change.
I think to add to that, I agree, and I think the thing that helps that though is having a vision to want to lead. So I completely agree that, and certainly looking back at times when, I cringe also about things that I've done, and it's, for me, leadership has become also a process of realizing that it's really about followership or whatever you want to call it, and not actually about having to be the person at the front being seen to be the leader. It's actually been a lot of the time about getting out of the way, and I think some of that has come with for me again through learning the hard way, and this question always makes me smile because I mentioned earlier I felt that not confident enough that I knew enough about business, even though I was working in a fairly responsible job at the time. I left, learnt more, then went to get back into the industry that I'd left, and had an interview at which for a senior position where someone asked me that question, do you think leaders are born or made? And I'd just come out of a module, like a whole module where we'd studied that question and read about, 6 books from each side of the argument and discussed it. And as I started to answer, she cut me off and just said, I don't believe, I believe they're born and you're not one of them. And it was like, whoa, okay. It was like, this is not an organization that I want to be part of. And I think the kind of gap for me and in fact industry probably, the gap for me between having done all this academic learning and then someone just deciding, something on the spot, said an awful lot. And I spend a lot of time trying to get the opposite view across. But I do think you still, in order to want to be a leader, you have to have something you want to achieve.
Chris, going from working at the AFL in the rugby league in Australia to setting up Pass It On clothing, that takes a lot of belief and a lot of hope, I think. And the one thing that struck me from our conversation a few weeks ago was you said you gave homeless people dignity of choice by giving them the opportunity to choose their clothes rather than just them being given to them, and they secure hope from that as well. Do you think in the early stages of an entrepreneurial journey, the leader needs belief or they need hope?
I think it's belief. I think, you talk about your values and stuff. It's your purpose. If you've got purpose, then you've got the will. And then, look, you go on the journey, you're going to cop knocks the whole way, right? But if you've got that single devoted purpose and you've got the will, you don't get knocked off. And I think that's probably the one thing that really defines leaders, is that, you know, you can have all sorts of challenges, but you just keep getting up, keep going forward, and then the road opens up for you. You know, it's amazing if you just keep going that one step after the other. I mean, you know, we do 50 weeks a year, and I tell you, I don't have great services every week, but I'm there the next week, and, you know, then that service is gone, and you're on, and you keep going, and you just keep going with your purpose. And again, you're just growing each time you're doing it. And I think that's the thing, the repetition in growing. And the other thing is, I think just keeping your eyes open. And one, I think it was V before, used the word perspective. I think that's probably the biggest word nowadays in corporates, is when I'm a much better person now, 4 years after starting this journey, than when I started. Right, I'm a completely different person as far as the way I look at human beings and the way I am with human beings, and my whole personality has been shifted by being into an area that was completely out of my comfort zone, and seeing the value of the people in that space. And then that's sort of totally rewired my mind about how things work in the world. And I think that's really important. You know, you talked about the corporates coming into our social sort of communities, is actually getting them to understand their value system and belief system, and just rewiring that a little bit, because then you've got buy-in. And if you've got buy-in from a corporate, they can help you along the way, because, as you mentioned before, they've got resources and ability to do that.
Yeah. Almira, in the social enterprise and innovation space, do you feel there are specific leadership characteristics that are required there, or nuances of those characteristics that you'd find in business, or are they the same?
I think what's interesting is we've had a lot of business leaders who've also recently had children, and that's when they come to us, because I think it is that it's looking into the future beyond just the value you provide to your shareholders and to that immediate network. I think it really is the ability to think bigger and to have that ambition. And I think that that's really important going forward in terms of business and how business operates in this new normal. Mm-hmm. is the ability to innovate, and is the ability to kind of think broader, and, you know, think about what you're doing, and then kind of take out the commercial aspect and see what is that intrinsic value that you're providing. And now how can we take that and apply it, you know, to other people who perhaps can't access the services?
Yeah. You all have come into your respective businesses because you, as I've said a few times, because you have that purpose and passion. How do you give that passion to your employees or those you work at? How do you translate it? How do you ensure that they understand the full depth of passion and purpose behind that business, so they act with the same inspiration and aspiration as you do? Arif, maybe if we start with you on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're looking for people to join us, I mean, you know, one of the important things we ask them is, you know, their view on sustainability. Is it something that is important in their lives? Because I think that's important to us. I think that, you know, it's obviously important to instill in people, but we want people to believe in the journey. So, you know, when they are talking to people about it, there's that real belief. They're using it in their daily lives. It's not something that we're imposing on them. It's not something we're teaching them. It is important to them. And I think that's the first start, is that, you know, for our employees, they need to have that belief, and that's what we ask, and that's what we look for. I mean, I think also then it's about information. So making sure that, you know, they understand the problem. We talk to them about, you know, what we're talking about, what we're looking at, the facts, the figures, how you can change things, the innovations, what we're working on. So it's keeping people informed as well. So, you know, they understand the size of the problem, but they also understand on a practical basis what we as a business can do to help other businesses fix it. So it's the size of the problem, but also the practical steps, the really simple practical steps that every individual business can do to make themselves more sustainable from a technology point of view. And it really is very easy. And it's just always equipping people with both sides of that, with the argument.
Yes.
Can I come in here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, for me, this was a bit of a journey, because I just assumed that everybody else would, you know, subscribe to my values. And I had to learn from experience that wasn't the case. And, you know, I'm with a whole bunch of people from my culture, Māori culture, and we will turn up to these corporate events and just expecting them to act in a particular way. And that wasn't always the case. And so I just learned I needed to be really clear for myself what that meant. And then, you know, because there's always compromise. also wanted to be everybody's friend and go out and party and enjoy myself with them. But there was a point where I had to say, this is more important. You know, the purpose of our organisation is more important than these other things that you're evaluating right now. So it's just a matter of being really clear and aligning that purpose of the organisation with their own personal purpose as well, so that they come on the journey with us.
Yeah. We always end the end of the new P&L with a couple of top tips for those listeners or those who are viewing this. It'd be great if we could go around the panel for each of you alphabetically, which will make it easier. Just to give one or two top tips in terms of what advice you would give to those entrepreneurs listening or those budding entrepreneurs listening. And they could be those starting a business or increasingly those within a business, you know, those intrapreneurs, if you like, that are looking to change the world within a business, not just the world outside. What would be one or two pieces of advice? So a quick calculation, Ellie, you look like you're the first one.
By the magic of the alphabet.
Yes.
Probably my two bits of advice is just do it. Just don't think, I know, Tanya, you do lots of research. I was much more of an activist where I tend to just jump in and do stuff. And obviously that hurts sometimes, I'm not going to lie. But once you do something, then you get a reaction back. It's chemical. And also, always ask forgiveness rather than permission. There are so many people out there who will somehow can create a construct where you feel you have to ask them if you can do something. I learned quite early on, it's much easier to say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that was going to be a problem, than it is, because at least you've done it then, haven't you? And I think that's my top tip to get things done.
Almira.
I think my top tips would be that asking and needing help is not a weakness. I think we only get to where we're going through community, through collaboration. So never feel, inhibited to ask for help from anybody. But also to remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. You got to pace your way through it, manage your expectations and stay positive and hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Arif.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll, echo some of that and say, I think research is important. And I don't mean, research for a long period of time, but get yourself informed, speak to people, find out the information that's out there. I think the second part is, don't be afraid to fail. I mean, I think that, failure is an important part of business, and failure is a learning, a learning experience more than anything else. So see it as something positive. I think if you do it over and over again, then, don't do that. But when you do fail, take it, look at it, define the problem, work out exactly where you went wrong. Don't brush it under the carpet, but analyze it, find out where you went wrong, and make sure you don't do that when you're faced with the next problem.
Yeah. Chris.
Excuse everyone, we're running our online auction, online raffle in the background. We've got another one at a venue tonight, so that's what's going on if you're just seeing the girls in the pajamas here in Sydney. I think the big thing I would say is just the will. I think the will of what you want to do, I touched on it before, is just to keep going, and there's many ways to do it. Like I was like Ali, I just wing it. You just jump on there and wing it and make decisions on the fly. But also, I think Arif said, learn from your mistakes. I've always got a theory, just make them once, right? And then you're on sort of the track. So I think, in this space, you've just got to go for it, because if you want to have impact, you've got to have a real crack at it, right? And it can be that it's not been done like that way before. I mean, we've hit a couple of hurdles with people along the way. You don't do it like this. You've got no experience in the industry. And we just shrug and go, yeah, but we don't care. And we just keep going, and, the people we have to be accountable to are our homeless friends. I mean, they're the ones we help every week, right? So if they don't have buy-in, if they don't buy into us, then we've got nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So they're our focus always. So yeah, as I said, just know the people you're trying to help as well. And, give them everything you can of you. And I think you get it back in spades. And then I think the broader community sees your passion and will jump on board with you.
Yeah. Carl.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what everybody else says, I think as a young person, you're quite lucky in the sense that, you don't know really what you're getting yourself into. So just go for it. Just, put yourself forward, and you're going to get hit and pushed back and knocked around. But you just got to have that resilience, and that resilience comes back to the purpose, what it is that you really believe in. and that's going to drive you right through. The other thing I wish I'd done a lot more of, and I'm starting to do more of now, is just ask for help. You know, and sometimes you think you're the only one on this journey, and also you're fighting all your own demons and people who have pushed you into a spot who think you can't do it, and you're going to show them, and it's your battle. But that's not going to get you ahead. What's going to get you ahead is letting the ego go, reaching out to others and trying to get them to buy into the vision that what you want to achieve, and asking for help along the way.
Yeah, thank you. Tanya.
So mine is a bit of a cliche, I'm afraid, but I would say don't be the smartest person in the room. And for some of us, that's much easier than others. I appreciate, but even if you're an expert in one area, there's going to be people who are much smarter in other areas. Yeah. So I think that's key for me is surrounding yourself with people who can teach you along the way, and especially from, I think, kind of diverse backgrounds as well. I think that's so important, to co-create with people from diverse backgrounds. Yeah. I guess finally, I would say build an ecosystem. If there isn't one there, build it. If there is, use it. And we can't do this all alone. And so much energy comes from like-minded people, and so much can be learnt from them. So yeah.
Yeah. Veronica, I'm sorry if you've been striking off all of the other ideas.
It's quite a list, isn't it? They're wonderful, wonderful tips. I agree with everything that's been said. I think picking up on Chris's point really is kind of know who your audience is, know who you're trying to help, and know who your work is going to help support, and the proposition and the niche that you're going to serve. Basically, know that first and foremost. I would definitely say work your plan and play to your strengths. I think that's really crucial, because everyone's got their own inherent strengths that make them amazing at something. So I think if you can play to your strength, you're in the right direction. And my final thing, and probably this is one thing that I will always say to everyone, is be consistent. So that's my big thing, is always be consistent. So whatever the promise is, keep delivering consistently, and be consistent is a big thing for me.
It's a good point to end on. Thank you all so very much for your time today. It's been a fantastic conversation, and very, very insightful, so thank you. Thank you once again for listening to the new P&L Passion into Purpose Roundtable. If you'd like to leave a review, please do on your streaming platform or download platform. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the new P&L, please go to principlesandleadership.com. You can send us an email, recommend us a topic, or even recommend you as a guest on the new P&L. So I'm Paul from the new P&L, and thanks for listening.